I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening and welcome to this webinar. My name is Michael Danner. I'm the Associate Executive Director of Mennonite Church USA. In this webinar, what I'm going to do is to provide an overview of MCUSA polity or MCUSA's decision-making structure, and then talk a little bit about how the Special Delegate Assembly in May actually fits into that structurally. The best resource for you when it comes to structure and polity is the MCUSA bylaws, right? So if you read the bylaws, understand the bylaws, you'll understand how our system is set up to work. And those are available through a quick link on the homepage of Mennonite Church USA. So Mennonite USA website, and that's where you can actually get a copy of those. What we will not cover, just in case, there's a moment whenever you go to a class and the professor says, you're in Econ 101, if this isn't the class you wanted to be at, you should, you can get up and leave. Well, the things we're not going to talk about, we're not going to cover anything related to particular resolutions that you may have questions about. We're not going to talk about executive board decision-making processes or anything related to executive board decisions in this meeting. We're not going to talk about the resolutions process or any of those kinds of things. Those kinds of questions will be covered, and you'll have an opportunity to engage around those questions, but they'll be covered in future webinars, discussion panels, and other sorts of resources. The best way for you to keep informed and get all the information you need relative to this Special Delegate Assembly is to do two things. First of all, sign up for Piecemeal. Piecemeal is the weekly email from Mennonite Church USA that will give you links to every different articles, different blogs, different resources that are coming up. So subscribe to Piecemeal if you haven't done that already. Cammie's going to put something in the chat for you. There's a link there for Piecemeal. Also, there is a resource page for the Special Delegate Assembly on Mennonite Church USA's website. And so if you go to that website, look at those links, subscribe to those links, that would be another place where you can keep up with the all the information that you need about the Special Delegate Assembly. During this webinar, probably the best way to engage the material is to be in a speaker view, or this might also be spotlighted. So if I show up large, then that's the way it'll be best for you. You will not be able to unmute yourself in the webinar, and also the chat feature is turned off in terms of chatting to one another. You will be able to chat when you put something in the chat, that will go directly to the host. And so you can chat with the host, but you cannot chat with each other. We've just found that it's a lot easier to stay focused and to keep things on track when those are the rules. If you have questions, what you do is just put that question in the chat. That chat will go to the host, and then when it's time for Q&A, I'll be able to see those, and I'll be able to respond as best as I can to any questions that you may have. Brief overview. So what we're going to do first is a brief overview of the structure. What we're going to do second is talk about the special session of the Delegate Assembly and how that fits into the structure. And then the third thing we're going to do is have a Q&A. So with that, please join me in prayer, and we'll get going. Gracious God, as we gather here tonight through this technology and through Zoom into this space, we come as your people, as a part of Mennonite Church USA. And while it's, this is about bylaws and rules and structures and things like that, we recognize that you work in the midst of well-ordered and intentional ways of relating to one another and working together, especially over a large group like a denomination. And so we ask that as we enter into this, we actually listen and try to learn a bit about how this church is structured for the betterment of people being able to speak into the life and the future and the health of the church. And so just be present with us, and may this be a fruitful time for all of us. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So the first thing we'll talk about is the actual delegate assembly itself. When people think about a delegate assembly, they often think of just the meeting, but actually, according to our bylaws, the delegate assembly is not a meeting. It is a denominational body representative of the constituency of Mennonite Church USA. So it is a group of people that get together, but the assembly is actually the people and not the fact that we're at a meeting. It's not the meeting. And so it's a representative body, meaning that this group, more than any other group in Mennonite Church USA, actually is to be representative of both congregations and conferences. So the delegate body consists of delegates from area conferences, congregations, and officially designated racial ethnic groups. So when they get together, this leadership body is made up of the broadest possible constituency or representation of Mennonite Church USA. Every congregation gets to send delegates based upon the same rules. Every conference gets to send delegates based upon the same rules. Racial ethnic groups are a little bit different, but they get a certain number of delegates as well. That is all spelled out in the bylaws, so I don't really feel like I need to go through it again, but for congregations, a congregation will get one delegate per every 100 or part thereof, and they get one youth delegate. Every conference gets one delegate for every 1,000 members in that conference and every part thereof, and 2 youth delegates. Racial ethnic groups get 3 delegates plus another delegate per every 1,000 members or part thereof as well. So that's what makes up this representative body. The purpose, I'm going to read just from the bylaws themselves. So what is the purpose of the delegate assembly? Well, the delegate assembly, I'll just read it. The delegate assembly shall be constituted as a denominational body, representative of the constituency through area conferences, congregational delegates, and racial ethnic council reps. The delegate assembly as a representative of the church shall function in the following ways. This is their purpose. A, they provide opportunity to assemble for worship, fellowship, prophecy, acquaintance, and understanding, and to deepen Christian commitment. Second purpose is to discuss and decide major issues of policy for the national conference or the denomination, and to discern the voice and the spirit in the midst of the delegate assembly. What is the spirit saying to this gathered group of representative constituents? The third thing is to provide opportunity to speak to the establishment of general policies and the development of programs to carry out those policies. So the delegate body speaks into that for the wider church when it's gathered together. D, they're to receive reports from the executive board, its committees, program boards, and councils. Reports are presented in writing and shall include financial accounting. So it's a space where the representative body of the church actually hears from the executive board, its committees, and the program board, so you can see what's going on and provide oversight of these things. And then the other thing is to review current programs and act on program priorities as presented by the executive board. So sometimes the executive board will bring things to the delegates to have the delegates give their a review or to give some input on the delegate body. The other thing that the delegate assembly does is actually elects certain people in certain positions. They elect moderators, moderator elects, and also certain people to serve on other agency boards and things of that nature. So that's essentially the purpose of the delegate assembly. In our polity, in Mennonite Church USA polity, the representative body called the delegate assembly is recognized as the highest authority really in the church. And so anything that the delegate body discerns is considered to be fairly weighty in the life of the church. So it's pretty important. What I want to do now is talk about maybe 3 different ways to understand, or 3 different lenses through which to understand our structures, because we have a lot of different pieces, and sometimes people don't quite understand how they work together. But here's the first kind of overlay. And this is what we would call the agency structure, right? So we have the delegate assembly, which we just talked about. Our bylaws say that when the delegate assembly is not gathered together, that the executive board of Mennonite Church USA actually then runs the church or makes decisions for the church when the delegate assembly is not in session. So you notice these are kind of stacked on each other, but that doesn't really, it does imply some hierarchy, but the connections aren't always straightforward. But there's a delegate assembly, then there's an executive board when the assembly is not gathered that does the work of the church. When the executive board's not in session, they actually have an executive board staff, and the staff actually carries out the programs and the direction of the church. Like, that's their job. So I'm a part of the executive board staff, which would include Glenn Guyton, Iris Staley-Orn, Hartshorn, and others that are on our staff, our comm team. All of that is executive board staff. So you have the assembly and you have the executive board and the executive staff. And then we have in MCUSA 5 program agencies. And so the program agencies are the agencies that actually carry out the ministry of the church. And this is maybe a little bit bigger so that you can see it. We have Mennonite Education Agency, we have Mennonite Health Services, Minnow Media, which is a publishing house, Mennonite Mission Network, and Everence. These would be the 5 program agencies. So this is one way to understand the purpose of the assembly, the executive board, and the program agencies. The program agencies kind of carry out the ministry that the delegate body discerns and that the executive board wants to carry forward. So that's one way to understand our structure, or one way that our structure actually exists. The other way is this idea of conferences and congregations. So who are the people that actually make up, and the structures that actually make up the whole of Mennonite Church USA? I kept it consistent in terms of the slide. You have the Delegate Assembly, which still is the kind of the highest discerning body or representative body. You have the board and the staff, but we also have 16 area conferences. And so there are 16 area conferences that actually comprise the membership of Mennonite Church USA. And the area conferences themselves are made up of congregations. And so Mennonite Church USA, you can understand as congregations that gather together. Those congregations join area conferences. In our polity, we have something called derived membership, which means the congregations are parts of the conferences. The conferences actually are part of Mennonite Church USA, and any congregation that's part of an MCUSA conference is by derived membership a member of Mennonite Church USA. And so this is another way to understand our structure, or another look at it. If you read through the bylaws, congregations have certain rights and responsibilities related to being a member of the wider body or being that conference. The area conferences also have certain responsibilities, rights, and privileges, but also responsibilities as a member of Mennonite Church USA. Those are all different articles that are in the bylaws. Within that, probably one of the big features, or one of the big responsibilities of the area conference is actually to credential pastoral leaders on behalf of Mennonite Church USA. So if you're an area conference of Mennonite Church USA, you have the credentialing authority that comes with that relationship, and then you have responsibility for credentialing the pastors or credential leaders within that area conference. And so that's another way. So we have the agency structure. That's how kind of programming gets done. We also have, this is more like the structure of how people are organized within the church. You have congregations, conferences, the board, and the assembly. And then this third slide is a bit about teams or meetings or groups of folks that actually provide leadership within this structure. So you have, again, a delegate assembly, that representative body. You have an executive board and staff, but there's a few other leadership structures in the church. One of those would be the Constituency Leadership Council. So the Constituency Leaders Council is a leadership body in Mennonite Church USA that exists for a number of different purposes, but one of their purposes is to be a connective link between congregations and conferences and the executive board when the delegate assembly is not in session. The Constituency Leadership Council, or Leaders Council, is made up of 3 representatives from every area conference, plus representatives from program agencies and representatives from racial ethnic groups within the church. Most conferences will send their executive conference minister or one of their conference ministry staffs, their moderator, and then kind of an at-large member. The CLC, as it's called, meets about twice a year, and they do various things depending on the context or what's going on, where we're at in the church year and things of that nature. There's also a leadership discernment committee, and that is a standing committee. It's the only standing committee in our bylaws. That leadership discernment committee actually does exactly what they say. They discern leadership for different roles within the denomination itself, and then also different leaders for different roles for program agencies that MCUSA is responsible for appointing. And so they do that work pretty much all year round. All the time they're doing board development, trying to find different people to lead in the church. They usually present then a slate of certain appointees to the delegate body, which you then would approve at a delegate assembly. The third group is appointed, that I have on here, is a resolutions committee. I did want to point out that this is a general view, right? There's some nuance to different things, and probably some other things we could talk about if we wanted to spend more time. But the third group is appointed by the executive board, and that's the resolutions committee. So every biennium, the executive board appoints a resolutions committee and creates the framework for that resolutions committee to do their work. And the purpose of the resolutions committee is to provide a pathway for the constituency of MC USA to bring issues before the delegate body, right? That's the goal of what a good resolutions process will do. And so if there are people in the congregations, in the churches, in the conferences that have particular issues that they find they'd like the delegates' feedback or input on, you can write a resolution, present that to the resolutions committee. The resolutions committee will consider that and process that. And then they'll make a discernment about whether to bring that before the delegate assembly or not. And so that's kind of a big view, kind of a 30,000 foot view of what the resolutions committee does. There's essentially, when you think about delegate assemblies, there's three ways that resolutions actually can get to before a resolution can get before the delegate assembly. And one way is through the resolutions process. Another way is actually the executive board in our policy can bring a resolution directly to the delegate assembly without any other processing. That's one of their responsibilities. So they can bring a resolution directly. Doesn't necessarily have to go through the resolutions committee at all. And then you can bring resolutions from the floor at different times under particular rules. Those are processed by the resolutions committee and the board, and then they can go to the delegate assembly. So there are about three pathways to get a resolution before a delegate assembly. I know from what I'm told, I'm talking really fast. And so I'm trying to slow down, but hopefully you're able to kind of catch this. And also, if you have questions as I go, please just put those in the chat. The next thing then we want to talk about is, so in May, so May 27th through 30th, there's going to be what's called a special session of the delegate assembly. And so if you read our bylaws, there is a provision for a meeting. So the delegate assembly in general is supposed to meet every 2 years in regular session. That's the pattern. The time and the place of the meeting is determined by the executive board and communicated to congregations and conferences at in a particular time frames. It has to be 90 days prior to the meeting. Anything that's going to be considered by the delegate session has to be clearly articulated. There can also be a special session of the delegate assembly. And so what's happening May 27th to 30th is a special session of the delegate assembly. The delegates met virtually in July of last year. They'll meet again in July of 2023 is the current plan in the biannual cycle. Those are the regular meetings. This is a special session that was called, and this is what it says: special sessions of the delegate assembly may be called by the moderator or the moderator-elect with the consent of the executive board. So if the moderator or the moderator-elect wants to call a special session of the assembly, if the board agrees, we can call a special session. In the case of that special session, written notice of the meeting and the purpose of the meeting, along with any proposed actions to be taken, shall be submitted to area conferences and to member congregations at least 90 days in advance of the meeting date. So because there's a special session in May 27th through 30th, no later than 90 days prior to that, you will have, as delegates, area conference and congregations will have the time, the place, the purpose, and any proposed actions to be taken. That has to go before that. And that is essentially the delegate assembly. What would happen, or how we got to where we're having a special assembly, is because of the COVID pandemic. We knew there was some question about whether we'd be able to meet in person last July. There was some question about how well we could process delegate discernment, especially on substantive matters via Zoom or some other method. And so it's thought best that we not try to discern any substantive delegate resolutions last July. And so they planned out as much as, at that time, as much as we knew, to be as safe as possible. We decided to have this in-person delegate session, special session in May of 2022 in order to process particular resolutions in person. of course, we won't talk about the content of those, but there's the resolution from the executive board on the membership guidelines. There is a resolution by Anabaptist Disability Network on accessibility in the church, and then a study resolution on justice and justice making relative to policing, which will at that time we knew would be considered, and we thought that would be best, or the board thought it would be best to only do that in a special session. So that is kind of how we got to this place. But the way that this session kind of meets with fits within our structure is that it's a gathering of the Delegate Assembly, which is a representative body for a special delegate session to consider all the items on that agenda. And so each congregation and each conference has the same kind of right to participate, to be present, and that is what we're planning to do. So I'll breathe. Hopefully there's some questions in the chat, and so let me take a look at that and see if there's any questions. There we go. This is being recorded, and yep, and it will be available to people on or through the website. Let me see what kind of questions we have. Website. Okay, well, I thought there was questions. There's 11 things in the chat, except for they were just all instructions from our tech team on this. And so, yeah, the only thing it says is, so there's one thing, I don't see the Resolutions Committee anywhere in the bylaws, and that's actually true. There is the Resolutions Committee itself is not a standing committee according to our bylaws. It is a committee that is appointed by the executive board to do particular work related to the assembly. And so the other thing you'll notice is that they're usually constant, like, so a resolutions committee will serve for a biennium. When the delegate assembly is over, that resolutions committee disappears, and the next executive board has to reconstitute a new resolutions committee for the next biennium, and they choose to do that. And also the rules can change a little bit because they're not stipulated in the bylaws. The rules for resolutions can actually change from biennium to biennium. And I think if you look in our history, you can see that. But they are not that is correct, that they're not a standing committee according to the bylaws. Let me look at a few others. Will there will there be worship times and other activities besides the meetings? There'll actually be a whole list of kind of what's planned for the delegate assembly. So I don't want to speak directly to that or to get ahead of them, but the short answer is yes, there'll be worship times, there'll be study times and other activities besides just doing delegate discernment in the midst of this. Will you be answering the questions submitted ahead of time? I think the ones that were, some of the questions were a bit off the content of the topic of this particular focus. I know when you see a title of a webinar, it's hard to tell exactly what will be relevant, but we won't answering really any questions beyond just the basic structure. Do you understand the structure and how that works? There will be other webinars for dealing with other aspects or different kinds of content. So, so Cami, I guess if there's any questions that you find relevant there that you think I should answer, go ahead and put them in the chat. Yeah, so there's a question at the beginning of MC USA, boards needed to be representative of both men and women, something like 50% of each, ethnic and racial diversity, something like 20%. Is there anything like that anymore? Yes, there are, when it comes to the board, there is that, and developing nominees. So this relates to developing nominees for like the leadership discernment. When developing nominees for elected and appointed positions, the committee operates on the following assumptions: a ratio of 50 women to men, and 30/70 BIPOC to white leaders. And so that's in Article 5 of the bylaws. So that is stipulated and it is followed. There's a question about will there be a virtual component at the assembly? My understanding is no, there will not be a virtual component at the assembly. One of the things that we have found is that meeting all virtually was not really helpful, but having some people virtual and some in person is not also a good way to do business, because there's kind of at a disadvantage the folks that are zooming in versus the folks in the room. So this is an in-person meeting only. A couple of things about that. If we discern that it's not safe due to COVID to meet in person, my understanding is we'll simply postpone the meeting and the content of this meeting, and probably until the delegate assembly in 2023. So yeah, but there won't be a virtual option for this meeting. So either we won't meet. And the other thing to point out is that there were some people that were concerned that certain congregations wouldn't have the fiscal resources in order to pay to come to the assembly. MCUSA has worked out a way for congregations that truly lack the means to fund a delegate that will come alongside and help support those congregations to send delegates. And that will, on the resource page, there'll be information about that, how to apply for that, and how people can get these kind of grants so that they're able to send delegates. There'll be a means test to that. I'm not exactly sure what they landed on that, but there's a difference between we'd love to send a delegate, but we really can't afford it, and we would love to send a delegate, but we'd rather not spend the money on it. If you have the resources to send a delegate, one of the ways you show demonstration of commitment to the wider church is to actually invest in that. But if you truly can't do that, then we certainly want to make sure that everybody can access the in-person meeting as much as possible. So, will the delegate meetings operate under Robert's Rules of Order? Yes, that is how they will operate. Will the delegate assembly also be available virtually? It's only in person. Yes. So will youth delegates be the same for the special assembly as for regular assemblies? Yes. And so how delegates are discerned is the same exact way for a special session of the delegate assembly as it is for a regular session of the delegate assembly. So every congregation will get one youth delegate, no matter the size of the congregation, and then one delegate for all or for every part, full or part of 100. The meeting will be, again, it's May 27th through the 30th. It'll be in Kansas City, Missouri, and that's the location of the meeting. It'll start in the evening of the 27th, and it will conclude by noon on the 30th. I'm still reading. So there's a specific question about the resolution for repentance and transformation. I'm going to let somebody else cover that in another meeting, since the stated purpose of this meeting is really just to talk about the structure in general, the kind of the big picture structure of how our polity works. There are no, so one question is, what are the ages for youth delegates? They're actually in our bylaws, doesn't really stipulate any particular age limit for a youth delegate. We would assume that the congregations are discerning who they select for a youth delegate, and somebody that would have the interest and capability to engage in the delegate assembly in a way that would be helpful to them, and also that they can contribute, is kind of how I would think about it. But there is no stated age restrictions for youth. Yeah, a few questions. One to be both the CLC and the executive board will actually meet the morning of the 27th. So the morning of that, and then we'll start the delegate session on the evening. Are the discounted hotel rates in KC that are available now? So once registration goes live, you'll be able to schedule rooms that are connected to the delegate assembly at that rate. But I don't think that registration is going to go live until February. It's like February 1st. So, but there will be discounted hotel rates, just like any other assembly that we have. Delegate allotment. Yeah, does delegate allotment allow for credentialed leaders and 1 per 100 folks, or just 1 per 100? For the delegate assembly, pastors are not automatically delegates. So each congregation can send one delegate per 100 or every part thereof, and one youth delegate. That can be a pastor, but it's not automatically. It's not a pastor plus other delegates. They're not automatic delegates. The only people that are automatic delegates by role would be the executive board. So every executive board member is by role a delegate of Mennonite Church USA. Yeah, so there's a question that I can just read, or yeah, we are able to convince people to attend convention for various reasons, support your youth, helpful workshops, hear speakers from around the, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. I'm going to try to do something. I'm having trouble scrolling in such a way that I can read this. And you ever have that problem where you go to scroll and what you want to look at jumps off the top of the screen, and then when you try to bring it back down, it jumps off the bottom of the screen? That is actually what I'm going through right at this very moment. So let me try. So we're able to convince people to attend convention for various reasons, support our youth, helpful workshops, hear speakers from around the church. Attending delegate meetings is not on the top of the list. They've never seen my list. Some of us love the delegate meetings, but that's probably true. I think it's a true statement. They're usually not on the top of the list. MCUSA is asking a lot to ask churches to send delegates simply to decide resolutions. We are considering the most consequential resolutions in MCUSA's history with what may be a small representation. Is there a quorum? Yeah, for a long way, I should, no, the quorum is the delegates present for any gathered assembly. So the quorum requirements for a special session of the delegate assembly are no different than a regular delegate assembly. So it is just the members present on that day and in that time to make the decisions constitute a quorum. Okay, so evidently there's a prior version of the bylaws that it does state that youth delegates are to be between 16 and 21. And I think our most recent version, I didn't see that there, but I'll get back to you on that question since there seems to be some question. But I think in an earlier version with the Step Up program and some other things, they did define that. But right now, I'm not seeing that in our current bylaws. But I'll look at that and make that information available. Can you say again what the resolutions are that will be considered? I can say that, I mean, there are four resolutions that will be considered. There's a resolution on justice. These will all be on the website on the resource page. The resolution on justice making that deals with policing. There's a resolution on access from Anabaptist Disabilities Network. There's an executive board resolution on the membership guidelines. And then there's a resolution on repentance and transformation that was written by the inclusive pastors. The last one is a little bit of a different process because of the nature of the executive board decision. And I don't necessarily want to get into that in this particular context. So I would encourage you to ask that question to Linda, or just to wait for, there's going to be a specific webinar that actually deals with that particular resolution and how it's going to be voted on. But the shorthand is that there'll be one vote for the delegates will vote whether or not they want to consider that resolution, the resolution on repentance and transformation. If they vote yes, that they do want to consider it, then there'll be a time to process and vote on that resolution. If the delegates decide they don't have the capacity, don't have the desire, will, or whatever to consider that resolution, then that will not be considered and the agenda will just move forward. So, yeah. Okay, so thanks, John Carlson. He did find it, and it's in the bylaws that I must have missed it. So congregations may send an additional youth delegate ages 16 to 21. So erase my last answer that there's no age requirement. They need to be between 16 and 21. Good question. Will proof of vaccination be required? I'm unaware of what we're doing relative to vaccination status, but I'm sure that's being discussed by other planners, and will be communicated to you. Yeah. So thank you all for correcting me. That is 16 to 21 in our current bylaws. So. Yeah, I'm just kind of going through there. Yeah, so a question, I'm wondering why it's so important to meet in May. Can't things wait until next year? I think it'd be a good question for the executive board. I think we'd already committed to actually to the meeting. And so that's why they're going to continue to move forward in that way. But that's a question I would encourage you to ask to Linda Dibble, our moderator. You can leave that to her. Yeah. Yeah, so, and then Cammie pointed out that all resolutions are on the Delegate Assembly resource page. And so if you go to that resource page, it'll have all the resolutions and the information on those. And there's also now let's see if I can find it. There's an information sheet about the Delegate Assembly, the agenda for the Delegate Assembly, and how that'll be processed. So. Yeah, that's I'm at the end of the questions. One question: do I know when registration opens? I believe it's February 1st. That's the last I heard. So I work in Church Vitality, and I also work at, I don't know if you follow the news, I'm also CEO of MEA. And so I'm not exactly on the planning committee for the special delegate session, but I like church polity, and I've worked as a pastor and a conference minister and a denominational leader. So when it came to this, they said, hey, Mike, can you come and talk about church polity? But I'm a little bit outside of the loop on some of the other questions, which is why I'm saying, if you're patient and engaged in the other webinars, you're going to get more answers or more opportunities to have those questions answered. Someone asked if it's still possible to submit a resolution. It is not possible to submit a resolution at this time for the Special Assembly, but all of the resolution, probably the next opportunity to present a resolution would be a resolution for the 2023 delegate session. How do we reach the moderator? You could reach the moderator through email. That's probably the easiest way to do that, or you could email the executive director, Glenn Guyton, and just request that he pass this to the moderator, whatever note. And he's Glenn G at MennoniteUSA.org. That's his email. I don't know if there's a way to put that up there or not. Can the resolutions be amended? Yeah, so whenever there's a delegate assembly at the beginning of a special delegate, this special session, there'll be rules for the assembly. In general, there is a process where you can try to bring a substantive amendment to a particular resolution. What happens is that amendment has to be presented to the resolutions committee, and then the resolutions committee, along with the executive board, will discern whether they want to move that forward to the delegate assembly as an amendment. So that's the way that you would amend a resolution, is by my understanding is a percentage. And then the next question: what percentage of votes are needed to carry? According to the bylaws, a simple majority on all resolutions before the delegate assembly, unless another threshold has been set by a leadership group. My understanding, and yeah, I'll let somebody else at a later webinar speak definitively to what the final decision was on percentages. How many more webinars will there be before this special session? They're still in the process of trying to determine exactly how many, but at least between 6 and 8 more or webinars before the session. I know they're planning some that specifically deal with each resolution, that have people, authors, and different folks, that different panel discussions and other things that they're working on. But it looks like 6 to 8 more before the special session. And if you want to learn about polity again, you can watch this one on video, because it's. Are there any other questions that anyone has so far? Yeah, so the webinars are tentatively scheduled for Monday evening. So they'll be Mondays at 7 in this kind of time slot, and every webinar will be recorded. So if you're not able to make one, you can go back to the resource page and you can go back through and see whatever. Whatever. Somebody must have already emailed Glenn. So Yeah, the meeting location in Kansas City, I believe is, I guess I don't know that. So I thought it was at the convention center, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if anyone on this call, any leaders on this call knows an answer to that. That would be, okay. Yeah, the Westin, John Carlson, moderator-elect, says he believes it's at the Westin. And I think that's accurate. So. What other questions might you have? I'm always glad to talk about MCUSA polity and different understandings. I'm sure if somebody else was leading this, they might have shared some of these things differently or maybe explained them in a different way. Yeah, if you ever have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. Yeah, my email is michaeld@mennoniteusa.org, and I'm glad to chat about this as well. Tammy just put up again the FAQ on the resource page, and you can find more information there about that. Some of this information is coming out fairly quick. Yeah, Cami just put my email up there as well, so you can look at that. Yeah, if there's no more questions, thank you. It was good being with you tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evenings. If you're football fans, Monday Night Football is going to have a good game tonight. So if you're not, ignore that. So it's good seeing you all. Thank you.